Good morning, Redemption Hill. I'm Bob, one of the elders of our community, and we've been talking about Sabbath for a good number of weeks now. And I bet some of you are beginning to think, why are we still talking about Sabbath of all things? Take a day off, I get it. Well, we're still talking about Sabbath because the truth is we don't get it. Sabbath is the one command that we not only violate with impunity, but we take pride in breaking. I am so busy, we tell people. And underneath that statement, all too often is, I'm busy because I'm important. I'm busy because I'm worth something. We've talked about Sabbath as a command, Sabbath as a gift, Sabbath as a way of imitating God and as a way of ceasing from the effort to be God in our lives. This morning, we want to talk about another way of looking at Sabbath, Sabbath as resistance. Whether we believe it consciously or not, the air that we breathe, the water we swim in, the very essence of our modern consumeristic lives is work equals worth. Busyness equals importance. Productivity equals value. We work harder because we want more things, more comfort, security, more feelings of accomplishment, more kudos and praise, more sense of having earned our place in this crowded world. Last week, Robert led us through both the Genesis passages and the Exodus passages on Sabbath. The Sabbath was first modeled on the rhythms of creation, but secondly, as a response to the slave drivers of Pharaoh and his taskmasters. The people were encouraged to take a day and cease from production, from their striving, not only as a way of imitating God, who rested after creation, but also as a way of saying no, of pushing back against the culture of slavery that saw people simply as a means toward production, towards work, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. The context in which the Sabbath command was given to Israel is that they had just been rescued by God from, among other things, the grind of Pharaoh's system of endless production. But the Sabbath was also given as a protection against the Pharaoh inside of us and the Pharaohs all around us. The Pharaoh inside of us that pushes us to work more, work harder, that calls us lazy if we take time off, that keeps us from living healthier patterns of life that we can all see, but never seem to actually take up. Protection against the Pharaoh of culture that says work harder so you can get more, and now you have to make the payments on the more just to keep it, so you work even harder, and it just becomes this endless cycle. Biblical scholar Walter Brueggemann suggests that the Sabbath was designed as an act of resistance against the 24/7 life of Egypt. And I would add to that ancient Egypt and modern Egypt. The Pharaoh buried in the pyramid in the desert, and the Pharaoh that we see every day in the mirror and in the culture around us. You are only as valuable as the work you do. Your accomplishments are what define you. You don't deserve a day off. These are the internalized lies that our culture tells us and that Sabbath resists. In his book, Sabbath as Resistance, Brueggemann writes, in our contemporary context of the rat race of anxiety, the celebration of Sabbath is an act of both resistance and alternative. It is resistance because it is a visible insistence that our lives are not defined by the production and consumption of commodity goods. Such an act of resistance requires enormous intentionality and communal reinforcement amid the barrage of seductive pressures from the insatiable insistences of the market, with its intrusions into every part of our life, from the family to the national budget. He says, but Sabbath is not only resistance, it is alternative. The alternative on offer is the awareness and practice of the claim that we are situated on the receiving end of the gifts of God. Listen to the words of Isaiah, the prophet, from Isaiah 58, 13 through 14. Isaiah says, keep the Sabbath day holy. Don't pursue your own interests on that day, but enjoy the Sabbath and speak of it with delight as the Lord's holy day. Honor the Sabbath in everything you do on that day, and don't follow your own desires or talk idly. Then the Lord will be your delight. God says, I will give you great honor and satisfy you with the inheritance I promised to your ancestor Jacob. I, the Lord, have spoken. The Sabbath is a command, but that doesn't mean it has to be a chore. In fact, it's intended to be the very opposite of a chore. God gave us the Sabbath as a gift, a day to rejoice in his goodness and delight in the world in which we live. Yeah, you can think of the Sabbath through the lens of obligation and command. The Pharisees certainly did. And they multiplied rule on rule on rule about what Sabbath meant. And Jesus constantly resisted their way of doing Sabbath. In fact, he basically compared them to Pharaoh when he said that the Pharisees crushed people with unbearable religious demands and never lifted a finger to ease their burden. Can you imagine a harsher insult for a Jewish religious leader than to be compared to Pharaoh? Jesus resisted the culture of his day by viewing the Sabbath as a day to do good, a day to heal, to restore. And he calls those who follow him to do the same. In Isaiah, God invites us to speak of the Sabbath with delight, to revel in the rest that he offers. And when we do, we will find the Lord himself becoming our delight more and more and more. The Sabbath is not so much about dying to ourselves as it is about becoming fully alive. So how do we practice delight on the Sabbath? We do the things that are life-giving for us. If you love movies, go see a movie. If you love hiking, go for a hike. If you love gardening, plant some flowers. If you love being with your kids and wish you had more time with them, then do it. Play a game with them, take them to the park. Whatever is refreshing and inspiring for you, do that. Take a nap and do it without guilt. The Sabbath is a day to step away from being productive and to simply enjoy life. And in the midst of that joy, to say thank you to God. And as we engage in that weekly rhythm of rest, we are countering, we are resisting the deadly messages that come from outside us and from within that say, work harder, earn more, be better. The first time I really experienced that resistance, I had stepped away from being a pastor. And even though, financially we were fine, I had started working as an Uber and Lyft driver just to earn some extra money. And I'd been doing that every day. And the first Sunday that came along, after I had stepped away from pastoring, we had gone to church, we had worshiped, and I came home and I thought, well, I better get out and drive. And then I thought, well, wait, no, today's the Sabbath. And I had this internal struggle within myself because really for the first time I'd always been on salary. I'd had jobs that were hourly, but this was the first time that, like, if I didn't go out and grind, I didn't earn. If I rested, I left money on the table. And I knew that this was it was a moment for me where I had to choose. Do I lean into productivity where I'm trading my time for dollars? Or do I actually listen to what God is saying? Take a day off and trust that what I earn the other 6 days is going to be enough, that He will care for us if I honor His way, live the way that He's asking me to. Let me end with this. A writer in the New York Times a few years ago described her journey with Sabbath. It's a little bit of a long quote, but I'll read for you. She says, "My mood would darken until by Saturday afternoon, I'd be unresponsive and morose. My normal routine, which involved brunch with friends and swapping tales of misadventure and the relentless quest for romance and professional success, made me feel impossibly restless. I started spending Saturdays by myself. And after a while, I got lonely. And I did something that, as a teenager, profoundly put off by her religious education, I could never have imagined wanting to do. I began dropping in on a nearby synagogue. It was only much later that I developed a theory about my condition. I was suffering from the lack of a Sabbath. There is ample evidence that our relationship to work is out of whack. Ours is a society that pegs status to overachievement. We can't help admiring workaholics. Let me argue instead on behalf of an institution that has kept workaholism in reasonable check for thousands of years. Redemption Hill, Sabbath is a command, but it's also a gift. It is our way of saying no. No to workaholism, no to a society that sees us only as good for what we can produce, as good for what we can do. It's a day for us to rest in the love of God, to rest in our identity as beloved children of God. And it's a day to say no to all the demands and embrace delight. Would you pray with me? God, our hearts are restless until they find rest in you. May our weekly rhythms more and more demonstrate the rest that we find in you. May the gospel that we preach with our lives match the gospel we preach with our mouths, a gospel of grace, a gospel of freedom from earning, a gospel of resting in the finished work of Jesus. Amen. God bless you, Redemption Hill. Thank you.